It's 2022 draft day, and that means we dive into a full Baltimore Ravens 2022 draft day preview next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back here. It is a Thursday edition episode, but not just any Thursday, as we have 2022 draft day upon us now. Night one happens tonight. I'm excited for this. I hope you're excited for this. We've talked for months and months about prospects and needs and trade up and trade down scenarios and so much more. And now we're going to kind of have that all come to fruition over the course of this draft weekend. Obviously, night one tonight, then night two comes on Friday, that being rounds 2 and 3, and then day 3 being 4 through 7 on Saturday. And we have a lot to dive into today. And we'll kind of be talking more about the things we've already been talking about, but more of like a wrap up. So in the first segment, getting into more of a needs-based segment. So what the Ravens do need, positions they could double down at, my kind of final needs list for this team, et cetera, et cetera. Also some trade up and trade down talk in there. In the second segment, we'll dive into more prospect analysis. So players I would like the Ravens to draft, not like the Ravens to draft, et cetera, and getting into that. And then in the final segment, we'll be diving into my predictions. So I'll make a couple bold predictions. I'll predict who the Ravens take at 14, whether they will trade up or trade down from 14 and that kind of stuff, and also how many picks the Ravens could end up with in this draft. So a ton of different things to talk about, and I'm excited to dive into it with you here today. Before we do that, though, it's been a very difficult week for me technology-wise and internet-wise. There have been some difficulties uploading the audio version with some audio processing issues, and then the audio version went out fine yesterday, but then the video version had other issues. And so whether you've had issues in audio form or video form, seeing the show on time over the past couple of days, I do apologize. It's been difficult. And with technology, sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. You just kind of have to roll with the punches. That's what I've had to do and kind of just wait it out. So I do think I have found the root of the issues, though, and we should be good moving forward as we continue here on Locked On Ravens. So again, I apologize for that, but I am excited to dive into this content. And if you are here with us in video form that's anywhere, you can find us on YouTube. You can look up Locked On Ravens, find the channel there. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It does help out a ton. We're looking for 2,000 subscribers. That's our next goal here on the YouTube channel. So if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. And if you are considering it or you are going to subscribe in the future, I thank you in advance. And also, if you heard us in audio form, so Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, thank you as well. I appreciate every audio listener and video watcher. And if you're in audio form, be sure to follow us, turn on notifications so you know when our content comes out. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at KOStracker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. But let's dive into the content now. Starting off with this first segment, which is needs-based. And we're just going to have fun today, right? We have fun every day. We're going to have extra fun today because it's draft day. I'm pumped up. I'm excited. And needs-based, look, we've talked about it pretty at length over the course of these last couple of months. So for me, obviously, the two big ones will, if you want to throw three in there, cornerback, edge rusher, offensive line, particularly offensive tackle. I still do believe edge rusher is the bigger need than corner by a small margin, but there are arguments to flip-flop those two. Offensive tackle is another one that is a huge need, but the Ravens, assuming, and you don't really want to assume because, you don't want to get burned again, but assuming Ronnie Stanley is healthy, that's not as big of a need, but you still absolutely need to pick players there if you're the Ravens and early. And, this isn't just like, all right, well, Ronnie Stanley, the reports came out and everything, he's healthy. Let's just wait until the 7th round. That's not a situation I feel like the Ravens can put themselves in again. And it's a situation I don't think they will put themselves in again. But in terms of corner and edge, I do believe the Ravens will double down at both those positions. And we'll get into corner a bit in the third segment with a bold prediction of mine that could come true, could not, we'll see. But to me, it feels like, and I'll kind of run down a list a little bit, that cornerback and edge are two positions the Ravens could absolutely take in the first round, right? But that's not it. It feels like a first and a fourth round corner, first and a fourth round edge. Maybe you're looking at second and fourth or doubling down second and third for either of those two positions. That's what I think this team needs. And when you look at the cornerback position, you have the stars and Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters hopefully coming back from their injuries, obviously. At the edge position, you have some really quality players there too, like Tyus Bowser, who is unfortunately coming off of that Achilles injury, Dafe Owe, who looked really good during his rookie season, and Dalen Hayes even, who posted a training video and looked motivated in that. But to me, I feel like they just need some star power there at both those positions, less so at corner, obviously, because they have the stars already. But if the Ravens can trade up for a Kayvon Dimitto, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes here, I feel like that's something that Baltimore should very, very seriously entertain. Otherwise, though, I mean, going down a list of needs, quarterback is not one I'm picking at all. If there's maybe a quarterback that the Ravens feel won't reach them in undrafted free agency and he won't sign with the Ravens there, then maybe they could trade back into the 7th round, but that's just not a position I'm personally using a pick at in this draft. Running back to me is a day 3 pick. I would potentially see the Ravens taking one at the very end of day 2 in the 3rd round, kind of like around pick 100 or something of that nature. But I just feel like this is too deep of a running back class for the Ravens to. That would be an overspend to me if they spend a 1st round, 2nd round pick on a running back. I just feel like then there's not that player that warrants it, in my opinion. I think Breece Hall is the best in this class, and that's someone who I think is a 2nd round prospect, which again, I don't think that the Ravens should invest that. So there's a running back, fullback, and I have to say fullback because the Ravens drafted one last year. No, I don't think they should spend a pick there. Wide receiver, I'm okay with a wide receiver in any of the rounds. It's not my favorite pick in the 1st round, but I would be content with it. I like Jamison Williams a lot. Drake London brings lots to the table. The Ravens reportedly met with Garrett Wilson, so they have interest, but I feel like a George Pickens in the 2nd round. You can look at a guy like Alec Pierce maybe in the 3rd. Those are players I would feel comfortable picking. Justin Ross is one of my guys. I like him a lot, so that's there. Tight end, that's a day 3 pick to me. A lot of quality tight ends. Offensive tackle, that's a day 1, day 2 pick for me. Any later than that, maybe unless it's like a 110, maybe in that range. I feel like the Ravens need to invest in that position there. Guard, I think they're set. If it's a pure guard, I don't think the Ravens need it. Center, maybe like a day 2, day 3. Tyler Linderbaum's the best. We'll talk about him in the 2nd segment, but just a teaser to that segment. I don't think the Ravens should draft him. We'll talk about why in the 2nd segment, but so center, maybe like a Cole Strange, Salyer, some of those guys. I could see Luke Fortner, etc. Defensive lineman, that's a pick I'm okay with in any round. Any round, and there are options too. We'll talk about those options in the 2nd segment. And I feel like the Ravens could double down at that position as well, potentially. It's not as big of a need anymore because of Calais Campbell, but they could potentially double down. So whether it's a 1st and a 4th or a 2nd and a 4th, that could be something they potentially do. Edge, we kind of talked about that. That's any round for me. That they need multiple. I feel like they will take multiple. Inside linebacker, 1 for me is the right number. I feel like I would be content with an Nakobe Dean in the 2nd round. Devin Lloyd probably won't make it there, and obviously I don't feel like Dean will either, but he has more of a chance than Lloyd in my opinion. But there are other options too, like Troy Anderson, Leo Chanel, etc. There are quality options throughout all 7 rounds of the draft, depending on how big the Ravens view that, assuming, they're going to potentially re-sign LJ Fort. Maybe not. It feels like kind of 50-50 at this point, but I feel like one more guy could be very beneficial to that room, depending on when the round that he's taken in is, and the role will be dependent on that too. Cornerback, same thing. We talked about it. They should double down 1st and 4th, 2nd and 3rd, wherever it is. They should look to double down at that position. Safety, I don't feel like they need at all in this draft. Maybe if there's a best player available strategy where the Ravens have this guy super highly rated on their board. We talked about that throughout this week in a couple of our shows where, might not be a position of need, but if there's a Tylan Wallace situation, they could potentially make that move. So to me, unless the player is by far and away the best on the board, I don't think Baltimore should invest in the safety position. That they've done enough in free agency to maybe warrant just like an undrafted free agent signing to me there. Kicker, no. Punter, Matt Araiza is the only guy, and I'm content with Araiza. I feel like 5th round, those for me, it feels like he could go in the 3rd. I am personally not spending a 3rd on him, but we have seen the Ravens value special teams, and maybe that's a pick they do entertain. So we'll talk about that also in a bit in the 2nd segment and the kind of the special teams part of this whole thing. But also long snapper, that's a no from me as well. And in terms of trade up and trade downs, we'll get into that and more in the 2nd segment too. But it feels like with the way that this draft will go, there is a lot of value in the 20s to 40s, like 20s to 50s, that area. But again, picking at 14, that's like nothing to scoff at. The Ravens have barely picked that high over the course of their franchise history. They've done it, but it's been recently, all right, they're picking at 27, 28, those types of picks, 16, 18, right? So 14, you can move up and not have to give up a king's ransom of draft capital. Will still be a lot, but it's not trading up from 27 to 7 or 27 to 9. It's trading up from 14 to 7 or 14 to 9. So we'll talk about that in the second segment. So we'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be diving into prospects for the Ravens that I like and don't like, as well as trade up and trade down talk. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. So first, let me tell you a bit about Blue Nile. And whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. So shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. And if you're looking for fine jewelry, but if you're having trouble choosing it, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. And you can mark Mother's Day with something enduring: a classic diamond stud earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, birthstone pendants, and so much more at BlueNile.com. So this Mother's Day, give mom something that she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging. They won't give away what's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. We're back here. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker, your host, still here with you. And we have a ton of exciting stuff coming up on the Locked On Podcast Network for the 2022 draft. There's a big announcement that for the first time ever, Locked On is hosting live coverage of the 2022 draft from our studios in Dallas with pick analysis from our local team experts and draft gurus. So I will be making appearances, so be sure to tune in for Ravens analysis there. Tune in all 3 days, though, as our draft team guides you through every pick and every trade in real time. It all starts on Thursday, April 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, available on the Locked On NFL YouTube and the Odyssey app as well. And also, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. I greatly appreciate that. But let's not talk about some of these prospects. And there have been prospects galore that we have talked about on this show. My mock draft Mondays. So my goals, and I don't know if I've said this, but I feel like I have before. But so my goals for those mock draft Sundays, obviously there are multiple. Like I like doing the mock drafts. Mock draft Mondays are great, diving into different prospects, analyzing their fits on the Ravens. But kind of like a more underrated goal for me on those is all of those mock drafts combined, right? So take every mock draft that I've done for 2022 and combine them. I want to have every single player the Ravens pick in those mock drafts combined. So if it's, for example, Jordan Davis from one, and then a guy like Ty Chandler from another, and then Alec Pierce from another, and then another. If you combine all those mock drafts, I want to have every single Ravens draft pick from that year in one of my mock drafts. So we'll see how that goes this year. I want to look back at 2021 and see how I did. But for 2022, I'm going to be keeping an eye, and I'll keep everybody updated on how that goes. But prospect-wise, there's been a lot of talk about trading up. The Ravens have been reported to have looked into trade-up options. And, so much of this stuff now is smoke and mirrors, especially now that we are at draft day and that we've looked at draft week and seen a couple of these rumors pop up for a lot of different teams. But to me, it feels like Kayvon Dimitto is the prime trade-up option now. There has been kind of a wide range of opinions on where Dimitto could end up going. If Dimitto falls to 7, I feel like that's the trade-up for me, because I don't know if he falls past New York at 7. If the Giants go with an offensive tackle at number 5, which I feel like many think that will be the case, I think that they might not let Thibodeau go and Thibodeau fall past 7 and get, let's say it's Charles Cross and Thibodeau. That's a pretty solid class. But if the Ravens offer them a package of like 14, 45, and 100 and 196 or something, I think that's pretty decent. But the thing is, if the Ravens trade up, obviously that's biting into your pretty premium draft capital. Now, for a player like Thibodeau, it's worth it. If you're looking at trading up for, I don't know, like for the Ravens trading up for a wide receiver, I would not do that. Trading up for kind of a low end first round, top of the first round comparatively, player like a corner or an edge guy, I wouldn't do that. But a star stud talent like Thibodeau, that's somebody who I would definitely look into trading up for. Also, Derek Stingley Jr. is another one who I would trade up for as well if he starts to slip and fall. It seems like there's a lot of rumblings of Jermaine Johnson going a lot earlier than many expected, even as early as last week. So even the Jets at 4 seem like a possibility. Now, Johnson is a great fit for this Ravens defense, but it feels like that's a player that probably will not be in their reach. But I think trading up is a viable option for them. But if they give up 45, honestly, what I would do if I were the Ravens would be to then trade up again with 76 and another pick back into the second round, then trade back with 110, pick up some extra draft capital there. So a lot of maneuvering. So your draft would probably look like 55, and then probably around like 120 and then 130 and then the 139, 141, etc., which I don't think is terrible, but I feel like for the Ravens to have a first and second round pick in this draft is very important. And then from there, you can kind of utilize your other draft picks around and look at it that way. But realistic options for the Ravens at 14, like let's assume they stay at 14. Realistic options for them at that pick, obviously Jordan Davis has gotten a lot of buzz. Trent McDuffie, Andrew Booth. I know there's been the rumblings of Trevor Penning. I know there have been those rumblings. We'll talk about him in a couple of minutes. Tyler Linderbaum had those rumblings, not so much anymore. I mean, it feels like this will be a defensive pick, barring Charles Cross falling, right? It feels like Cross, to me, is the only offensive player that I would really consider at 14 outside of like the stud tackles like Ike Ekwonu and Evan Neal, obviously. A wide receiver, again, it's fine, like Drake London or Garrett Wilson or whoever, but I would prefer the only offensive player to be taken at 14 at the Ravens pick there would be Charles Cross if he does end up falling. Jordan Davis just feels like a Raven. I mean, it just feels like it's going to be the pick. We'll get into my actual pick prediction in the final segment, so stay tuned because it might be Davis, it might not be. I'm not gonna reveal it yet. But I mean, I just look at Davis, look at the athleticism, look at the size, and I think about, and I talked about this yesterday with Ingraven Vids. I think about offensive lines lining up and just like standing there on the first snap, before the first snap, looking at Calais Campbell and Jordan Davis standing up next to each other and just being like, how the heck are we going to block these two guys? Because again, it's like near impossible to double block or to single block Jordan Davis. It is near impossible to single block Calais Campbell. What are you going to do? I mean, what? And then you have an Afe Owe and then hopefully another edge guy. So I think that it'll just cause nightmare problems. Plus, Calais Campbell's not the future at defensive line. Same thing with Derek Wolfe. Same thing with Michael Pierce. You got to get a bit younger there. They've been trying a little bit with just Metabike and Broderick Washington, but I think Davis would be a solid addition. I know it's very hot and cold based off of where the fan base is with Davis right now. There have been questions about his 3-down ability. Can he keep his weight down, etc.? I think the Ravens will get him there. I think, again, a lot of players in this draft have the potential to be amazing star players in the right system fit. And some teams work well for players. Other teams don't. And a player who goes to X team might not be as good as if he went to Y team. So I think the Ravens would be a good fit for Davis. McDuffie is a player that I know the size concerns have some guys a little bit like, I don't really want McDuffie. But, I feel like McDuffie would be a really nice player on the Ravens. And that wasn't me saying I don't want McDuffie. I'm just saying some other people have said, the size kind of turns them off. And so I understand that for sure. But I've come around to McDuffie. I feel like he is a player that I would be comfortable taking at 14. Same thing with Andrew Booth, realistically. Those are some guys who I would be fine with there. Other guys could be Nakobe Dean, but that seems like more of a 20s pick to me, so maybe that's trading back. Devin Lloyd, I'd be okay with Devin Lloyd. I know some people don't really like it and kind of compare him a little bit to Patrick Queen, and same thing with Nakobe Dean as well. But I'd be fine with that, especially if the Ravens have a plan, right? They have to have a plan with those guys. So that's something I'd be okay with. But other first round, I talked about Trevor Penning and Tyler Linderbaum as guys who, to me, I wouldn't take at 14. I wouldn't take Linderbaum at all. I mean, the Ravens historically do not invest in the center position. Linderbaum, to me, is a player that if he does get drafted by the Ravens, I'm not saying that he can't become this great player, right? I'm not saying that. Same thing with Trevor Penning. I'm not saying he can't become a great player in a Ravens uniform too. It could potentially be realistic that he is the pick for the Ravens. But at 14, I feel like that's just too early. Linderbaum isn't a great scheme fit for the Ravens, and they haven't historically invested draft capital in the center position anyway. So, look, if Linderbaum is there at 45, I think you kind of have to take him because it's best player available, which is fine. But again, I feel like you just want a better scheme fit. The Ravens have expressed confidence in Patrick McCary, so I feel like that's going to be their option for 2022, which is, again, it's fine. But I just think that for Linderbaum, I would rather spend that draft capital somewhere else. Penning, kind of the same thing for me. trade back option. All right. I can see where the Ravens could view that, but 14 to me is a bit too early. George Karlaftis as well, someone who I do like, but I feel like is a little bit of a reach at 14 if I were the Ravens. So that's another trade back candidate. So three guys who I wouldn't take at 14 are Tyler Linderbaum, Trevor Penning, and George Karlaftis. And there are others as well, but those are the three main guys who I would. Devin Lloyd, okay, Devin Lloyd might be a trade back option for me if it was like 18. If it was 18, I'd be okay with trading back for Devin Lloyd and kind of not having him at 14 because you could pick up extra draft capital and not necessarily trade down too many spots. But there's a realistic option that the Ravens could trade down because it seems like the 11 to 15 range is the sweet spot for teams that want to move up into the top half of the draft. And the Ravens could maneuver around, get some extra premium draft capital, then move back up as well. There are so many options for that. So I'd be completely on board with that for sure. Other options on days 2 and 3 for the Ravens, Roger McCreary I really like as a corner. Cam Taylor-Britt, again, another player that I really like. There are a lot of these good corners. Marcus Jones out of Houston is another one that I've really come to like recently. There are plenty of options there. Kyler Gordon, I know in terms of edge guys, Arnold Ebiketie is a guy who is getting like late first round buzz a little bit. Josh Paschal seems like a Raven to me. That's a guy who I think could be a realistic option for them at 45 if he's still available. But again, you just never really know. Very good positional versatility there. Perrion Winfrey out of Oklahoma, a good defensive lineman who I think could really benefit them. Devontae Wyatt's probably off their draft board, in my opinion. I just think the off-field stuff, the Ravens have obviously put a very clear no-tolerance policy on that, and I just think Wyatt is, on the field, he's very talented, but off the field, there are those concerns. So I think that the Ravens will probably have him off of their draft board, but you could look at other guys like Travis Jones there. Logan Hall is kind of like a hybrid guy who can play a bunch of different positions. Then you look at the offensive line, and there are options outside of the Crosses and the Pennings and the Equanus and the Neals. You look at Rasheed Walker, who I think is really, really solid. Nicholas Petit-Frere, Abraham Lucas, just to name a few of the guys that could be fits. Daniel Falele, obviously, is somebody who has seen a stock fall a little bit, but I'm just like, I feel like I would take him. If he's available at 76, I'm running the card up, in my opinion. That was a player who was getting some late first round, early second round buzz at the beginning of the draft process. Obviously, has fallen a bit since then, but I feel like that's a pretty quality option for the Ravens there. In terms of interior guys, Cole Strange is someone who the Ravens have reportedly had some interest in, and I wouldn't be shocked if he is a Raven. Very nasty player on the field, very respectful of it. So that's something that the Ravens do value. But I feel like this draft, and this is like kind of a segue into segment 3, but I think the Ravens will value athletes in this draft who have positional versatility, something we have seen them do recently. But I think a key part of it's going to be because of the injuries. Ravens don't want to go through what they went through again in 2021 injury-wise. We've seen them say that. We have seen some changes they have made and heard about them. But the Ravens, if guys do end up going down again, the more positions somebody can play, the better. So if you have a player who can play guard and center instead of just center, if a guard goes down, the Ravens can move that center/guard to guard and put a center at center, and then that works out instead of having two centers and no positional versatility. If that guard goes down, you're kind of scrambling to see like, all right, who are we going to put there? So that's a really interesting point that I've kind of thought about and said, Ravens could value that. But yeah, other positions, safety wise, again, not really looking to anybody in particular. I mean, if you're looking at people who were technically safeties, Jalen Petrie, somebody who I really like in the second round, if he's still available. Daxton Hill is getting late first round buzz there. Inside linebackers, Troy Anderson, Leo Chenal, as I kind of talked about in that first segment, they're quality options. Jack Sanborn, another guy out of Wisconsin who did really well. So you can look to that as well. Tight end wise, Jeremy Ruckert's probably like the premium tight end I would take. There are others as well, like Chig Okonkwo and Cole Turner, a lot of other players who could really make an impact. But I feel like, to me, Ravens could be an investing team in Chig Okonkwo. I feel like that's a really good fit for them. Running back wise, Ty Chandler, Jerome Ford are two guys I really, really like at that position. And there are others as well. Brian Robinson, the top three guys, Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller, and Kenneth Walker probably are not in the Ravens range there, but there are a lot of options there if the Ravens do want that. Other edge guys, I could see the Ravens looking at D'Angelo Malone, Western Kentucky, kind of a smaller school prospect. Another smaller school prospect, Alex Wright out of UAB. I think that's another player they could potentially view as a later round-ish prospect. But there are a lot of different players, a lot of different skill sets in this draft. I mean, there are so many players from also small schools like Zion McCollum, Sam Houston State, who I think is a phenomenal cornerback. And if the Ravens can get him early day 3, that's something that I'd be more than happy with for this Ravens team. But there are a lot of different players that a lot of different people like, a lot of prospects, and the Ravens have a lot of potential fits. We'll just see how the board ends up falling for them, both positionally and prospect-wise. We'll head into our final break here now, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into my bold predictions for the Ravens and their 2022 draft, as well as just predictions in general. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, let me tell you a bit about BetOnline. And I'm actually going to, this will be a hard ad for me to read because it's with a heavy heart that I must say the Denver Nuggets have been eliminated from the 2022 NBA playoffs. It was a 5-game series with the Warriors. And for those who've been following along with me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. I've been talking about the betting on the series, and there's no need to bet anymore because the Warriors, they took the Nuggets to 5 and they did them in. So now the betting shifts to Nikola Jokic MVP odds for my Denver Nuggets. And if you want to do that, do it with betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. It's your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still here with you again. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe for daily Ravens content on YouTube and follow along in audio form for daily Ravens content. The same show in both audio and video form, but also make sure your second listen is Locked On NFL Draft with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. But let's dive into some bold predictions now for the Ravens and their 2022 draft. This is something I always like to do. It's something that I feel like not a lot of bold predictions become true, right? They're bold for a reason. We'll get into the actual predictions in a few minutes, but one of my bold predictions is I talked about the Ravens doubling down at cornerback, right? Well, I'm going to up that and say the Ravens triple down at cornerback in this class in some way, shape, or form. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the Ravens and what they should do with the position, right? Whether it's sign 2 guys and draft 1, draft 2 guys and sign 1. I still think they should draft 2 guys and sign a veteran. But it just feels like with how deep this cornerback class is, with the depth that they've lost, the Ravens have lost 4 corners. They've lost, well, technically 3 and 1's on the free agent market. They've lost Chris Westry, Anthony Averett, and Tavon Young. Jimmy Smith's still on the market, so maybe he comes back. Maybe they sign somebody else. But what the Ravens could do is they could say, hey, look, we lost 4 corners. We only have 2-ish on the roster, depending on how you view guys like Brandon Stevens or Darius Washington. But the Ravens could say, hey, we're going to use those guys as hybrid safeties, corners, but we also want to have pure guys. So let's sign 1 veteran and draft 3 and have 6 pure corners. And then also the hybrid guys with Stevens and Washington. So that's a bold prediction for me. You could look, if that's the case, to a 1st-round corner, a 3rd-round corner, and a 4th-round corner, or 1st-round corner, 4th, 5th. So those are the options there. But to me, it feels like the Ravens, they could look to heavily invest in that secondary. They've done it before, and I wouldn't be shocked if they did it again. So we'll see how they end up maneuvering around that. Also, I feel like the Ravens honestly could make more than 2 draft day trades. And I feel like that's a little bit bold because with the Ravens, I'm looking more to, like, as I talked about earlier, with if they trade up to 7, then they should trade up again back into the 2nd round because they probably want to have 45. Then they could move back and acquire more picks and trade up again. So, all right, here my second bold prediction officially is the Ravens are going to trade either up or down. So have 4 draft day trades. 4, more than 4 draft day trades. So 4 or more. Yeah, let's phrase it that way. 4 or more draft day trades for the Ravens in the 2022 draft. 10 picks is a lot to work with. It's a lot to work with, especially if they end up trading back in the 1st round. I could see them really doing their due diligence and saying, look, now we have 13 picks. Let's move up once. Let's move up again. Let's move up again. So it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up playing out. But to the point of pick number 14, my 3rd bold prediction, and this is technically not Super Bowl, but it kind of is considering all the discourse there's been around trading up or down, if the Ravens will stay put at pick number 14 and make a selection. And obviously this does depend on how the board falls. And if the Ravens have a nightmare scenario board where there are no quarterbacks taken in the first 13 picks, no wide receivers taken in the first 13 picks, there's probably a very, very strong case for trading back. But at the same time, if Jordan Davis is there and the Ravens like him enough, you don't want to play that trade back game because another team could like him just as much as they do, make a move, or just pick him outright, and then the Ravens don't have Jordan Davis to pick. So I think the Ravens have to be smart about trading back if there's a player they like and they feel like there's like a 50-50 shot of getting him where they're trading back to. Maybe they should just take him. But again, that risk, by the time the Ravens hit 14, my fourth bold prediction is that there will still be 3 players in their top 10 on their draft board. Now, obviously, I do not know what the Ravens draft board looks like, but it feels like with just how unpredictable the draft is, there are going to be a lot of prospects that people maybe don't expect to fall guys who get taken a lot earlier than expected. I mean, we see it every single season where there's this player who you're like, wow, I didn't expect this guy to get taken this earlier. Why is this guy falling? So I think for the Ravens, they're in a pretty decent spot at 14 to where if a couple players do end up falling, they could have 3 guys in their top 10 still available to them at pick number 14. So those are some bold predictions, going bolder on some, not as bold on others, but I know a lot of people understand that the draft is very unpredictable, just as I was kind of talking about. So staying at 14 is something that people are like, oh, well, that's kind of boring. Like, we want to see a trade up or trade down. And you start to get antsy, right? Because let's say, I don't know, let's say Kayvon Dimitto falls to 9. And then you're thinking, all right, Ravens, go make a move up. And then they don't. And then he falls to 10. You're thinking, oh, is he going to make it to 11? And he makes it to 11. And it's like heart pounding. It's like if there's a guy that you like so much in the draft and they keep falling and falling and falling, and it feels likely that they're going to make it to the Ravens pick. But again, it's like, oh, do they really make it? There's all that different stuff going on. So that's where I think a trade up would be beneficial. The Ravens talked about how they were worried Ben Cleveland wouldn't fall to them in the 3rd round last year because they had to wait a little bit. So Baltimore, I feel like, could end up making a move up if it's just a couple spots. And that's just not in the 1st round either. It could be any of those spots. But my official pick, I'm going to say it here for pick number 14. This is obviously assuming the Ravens do stay. It is not Jordan Davis. My official pick for the Ravens is not Jordan Davis in number 14. I still think that'd be a great pick, but it's not my official one. The player who I think the Ravens will select at pick number 14, if you've been following along with me, it's someone who I actually said a couple months ago would be my selection if guys like Derek Stingley and Thibodeau and all these guys didn't fall. It's Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie is my official prediction for the Ravens at pick number 14. He's a player that I feel like, obviously, there were the size concerns and there are the size concerns, but as positional versatility, can play inside and out, willing tackler, great ball skills. To me, height does not define a player, right? That's something that I don't hold against anyone. Obviously, there are some limitations in terms of what height can do for a player, in terms of 5'11 versus 6'2", for example, at the cornerback position. But, McDuffie's somebody who I think checks a lot of boxes for them. I don't believe Derek Stingley or Sauce Gardner will be there at 14. I think McDuffie has a decently good chance to be there at 14, not guaranteed or anything, but a decently good chance. So with corner being a big need for them, with the top 4 edge guys going off the board most likely before 14, I think that the Ravens will look to invest in the cornerback position, assuming a guy like Charles Cross doesn't fall. So my official realistic prediction for the Ravens at number 14 is cornerback Trent McDuffie. But that's all I have you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, it's draft day. It's super exciting. We're going to have coverage tomorrow, another show of what actually happened for the Ravens during the first night of the 2022 draft, getting into what the Ravens did during the 1st round. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you tomorrow.